hard to forget these images. Tomorrow marks the 4-year anniversary of the day Hurricane Katrina struck the Gulf Coast. 1,600 people died in that storm, most of them in New Orleans. More than 1.5 million were driven from their homes. A new book is helping to tell the tales of New Orleans residents who lived through the destruction. Josh Neufelf's graphic novel is called A.D. New Orleans After the Deluge. And thank you so much for being here. I find it so interesting that you weren't even from there. You went there to help out with the Red Cross and just see things and engross yourself in it firsthand and started blogging about it.
Right, yeah. I'm actually from New York City, though I did used to live in Chicago back in the 90s. Yeah, I had no real connection with New Orleans other than having been a visitor there as a tourist, and just seeing the images of the hurricane and people trapped on their roofs and the levees and the overpasses, and really feeling very connected to that and wanting to do something. I did end up volunteering with the Red Cross. So
you are a cartoonist, and then you take that with what you're experiencing in New Orleans, and you typically think of cartoons as being entertaining, but yet you took something that was so powerfully emotional and turned it into a cartoon in this book. It's incredible.
Well, there is a tradition in comics of doing nonfiction topics. I think a lot of people know Art Spiegelman's Mouse about the Holocaust, and Joe Sacco, who does a lot of work about areas like the Middle East and former Yugoslavia. So I feel like I'm part of that tradition of doing nonfiction comics.
And we had some of the pictures up there from the pages in the book, and what I found was it was somehow easier to look at in a cartoon form, that it drew me into the topic, and then I was able to connect with these characters. You have a number of people that you followed all the way through. Tell me about the characters.
Well, they're all real people, like you were saying. I decided that the best way to sort of tell this story was in this intimate way that you're talking about, to find real people who had experienced the storm in different ways. So we have Denise, who's shown there, who was a social worker who ended up at the convention center, and we've got Abbas and Darnell, who are caught in the flooding, trapped there and keep having to find higher ground, and Leo and Michelle, who are two young people who leave the city before the storm, but Leo has a huge comic book collection, and that's all at risk, and we find, I don't want to give it away, but it happens, but I tried to, in the voices of these different characters, to capture the different threads and experiences that so many New Orleanians and so many people on the Gulf Coast experience with the storm.
You've got a pastor's son in there, and so we have that faith element. You've got a doctor in there who is dealing with all of the health concerns as well. What I find so interesting is that in cartoons, really, these bubbles, there's not a lot for people to say, not a lot of room for words, but yet they're saying so much.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the great things about comics is that you can use, like they say, you know, a picture tells, it's worth 1,000 words. So I think with the combination of the words in the pictures and the expressions on people's faces and the details in the backgrounds, and it is important to say that, you know, I really did my research like a journalist, and all of the people's homes are from pictures that I took, and the DVDs on their shelves are the real DVDs they had. And so I really tried to be as true to their real lives and their experiences as possible.
Every last detail. And then you went back and interviewed them again. I mean, it really follows it and comes full circle all the way, not just when Hurricane Katrina hit, but long after, and when they weathered the storm, long after the storm really was in New Orleans.
Yeah, I mean, that was really important, was for me to remind people that this is a continuing story. Here we are 4 years down the line, and New Orleans is still rebuilding, and a lot of the people in this book are just getting their lives back to where they were when the hurricane struck. And so it was important to me in this book to sort of, you know, keep that story going and remind people that their lives continue, their story continues, and there's a lot more to the story of Katrina than just those 3 days in August and September of 2005.
Well, I have to tell you, Josh, this was a great way to tell that story. It was interesting, it was entertaining, it was thought-provoking, it was really wonderful. Thank you for sharing. The book is called A.D. New Orleans After the Deluge. Josh Neufelf will be discussing his book tonight at 7 o'clock at the Bookseller, which is at 4736 North Lincoln Avenue in Chicago. You can call them at 773-293-2665. And as always, we have all the information on our midday website. Tom Skilling.